Good evening. I'd like to welcome you and call to order the October 9th Port Orchard City Council regular meeting. Please stand me and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance, which will be led by Scout Troop 2338. Thank you. Did you catch that? Was Scout Troop 2338. So thank you for joining us tonight. We are to the approval of this evening's agenda. Are there any additions or subtractions? Entertain a motion if there's none.
Mr. Mayor, I would move to approve the agenda as presented.
Second.
A motion and a second to approve the agenda as presented. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? None. The agenda is approved. We are to our first citizen comment period. Anything on the agenda this evening? Anyone having a citizen comment for us? Okay. Seeing none, we'll close this first citizen comment period. We are to the consent agenda.
Mr. Mayor, I move that we approve the consent agenda as published.
Second.
Motion and a second by Councilmember Diener. Any further discussion of the consent agenda items? Charity is excused due to business obligations. All in favor of approving the consent agenda as presented, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Consent agenda is approved. We have no presentations or public hearings, so we're on to our business items. The first is item A, adoption of an ordinance amending Port Orchard Municipal Codes, Chapter 20.22 and 20.96 concerning permit processing and the vacation and alteration of final plats. Mr. Bond.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Members of council, city staff have become aware of inconsistencies and conflicts between Chapter 20.22 permit process types, Chapter 20.94 binding site plans, and Chapter 20.96 vacation and alteration of final plats, all in Title 20 of the Municipal Code, with regard to the correct permit type classifications for vacation and alteration of subdivisions, short subdivisions, and binding site plans. Staff have therefore prepared revisions to Chapters 20.22 and 20.96 to resolve the identified inconsistencies and conflicts between these chapters, and also between the Chapter 20.94. The ordinance attached was reviewed by the Planning Commission on September 4th, 2018, and a public hearing was held on that date. The Planning Commission voted unanimously to recommend approval of the ordinance as submitted. Staff recommends that the City Council vote to adopt an ordinance adopting revisions to Chapter 20.22 and 20.96 of the Port Orchard Municipal Code as presented.
Mr. Mayor? I move to adopt an ordinance adopting revisions to Chapter 20.22 and 20.96 of the Port Orchard Municipal Code as presented.
Second. Second by Councilmember Rosa Pepe. Further discussion of this code? Questions of Mr. Bond? Mr. Diener?
Did we have this at work study? I thought that we did.
I believe it was at the September work study. We definitely took it up at Land Use Committee,
Right.
and the Land Use Committee reviewed it at their last meeting.
My only comment would be, and I don't think it requires a motion, but if there was a work study, could we include that in the ordinance of adoption as in a whereas recital?
I will check the record and add that if necessary.
That's all that I have. Thank you.
With that, we have a motion and a second for the adoption of of an ordinance amending Port Orchard Municipal Codes 20.22 and 20.96. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Hearing none, the motion carries. We are on to our second action item this evening, which is a fabulous thing. We've finally found an engineer So Deb Howard has worked with the Public Works Department to create a job position. We had 2 job postings out there. We weren't sure, we couldn't find a EIT. We weren't sure if we were gonna find an engineer. So with that, Deb, would you like to talk about this further?
Thank you, Mayor, City Council members. The current workload of the Public Works Engineering Department has increased significantly over the last 6 months, which has included the increased volume of active development and capital projects. With this increase in workload, the need for a full-time civil engineer one is critical to the efficiency of the Public Works Engineering Department. This individual would be responsible for aiding the engineers with development review and inspection, construction administration, GIS, and AutoCAD mapping. Staff recommends that the City Council adopt the ordinance as presented to approve the job description and salary scale for the civil engineer one position in the Public Works Engineering Department.
Mr. Clausen?
Mr. Mayor, I move to adopt an ordinance approving the job description and salary schedule for the civil engineer one position in the Public Works Engineering Department thereon as presented.
Second.
A motion and a second by Councilmember Ashby. So Ian Smith is his name, and kind of hired him first and then wrote the job description to the skills that we had. So it's a little bit backwards, but we were at this for, gosh, 6 months, I think, trying to attract someone to the city. So I'm very thankful. He starts the 30th, if I'm not mistaken,
I think it's he'll be here the 28th.
28th, so
Yep.
before the end of the month.
Is he local?
He lives in
East Bremerton.
Yeah, East Bremerton, yeah, commuting.
Yeah, he was commuting to Seattle, and so he's gonna be over here now.
Family and small kids, and this is going to get quite a bit of his life back by going to work here.
A question I have, Mark, is he going to be able to do some of the design work that we
Yeah,
had hoped?
that's actually a huge benefit. He'll be able, he has, I mean, he worked for Cognate, he works for a firm in Seattle that's very reputable. And so he has a very large, strong design background. He has construction inspection background. So he's perfect for what we need for now. And then really, I just want to provide kind of a blank canvas for him to develop this design component that we've never had. We'll have to provide surveying, and we'll talk to Brandy about and Cindy about getting like an on-call surveyor over time, geotechnical. But from that, my goal is that we'll start with these 2 road designs and then just continue to build water design, sewer extensions, and just because he wants to design.
Okay, that's even more elaborate than I was anticipating, because I know we had talked about our ADA curbs that was going to be quite expensive to design, and
Yeah, he'll be able to do all that. And so we provide some surveying, and he has the drafting skills, the kind of all-encompassing CAD type activity. So yeah, this is a great ad for the city.
excellent.
So that as we've been working through the budget development process, we've been talking about that very thing, is we were looking to have to add some expensive consultants for those paving projects. And now, with some support from a surveying firm and a geotechnical firm, we should be able to do a lot of this work in-house. Also depends on development activity and how many applications are coming through the door, too. But it's an exciting hire for us. Mr. Diener?
Does this round out your needs, Mark, or do you see another engineering tech position in the future?
No, I don't. I think for right now, I think we're going to be fine.
Okay.
We're seeing a bit of a crest on the development, and we've got a lot of capital projects to finish up this year. And then, the next couple of years, we've got a lot of water and sewer projects to finish up. So, I just think this takes care of our immediate need. And then as we move forward, start doing more in-house design, start saving money there. So I think from an engineering perspective, the only thing that I see in the future is the city, I think, does need to move to a public works director and then a city engineer. I know Rob and I have talked about that someday, that you actually have the public works director that's able to disassociate more and be more leadership on just the overall. I'd like to see that happen before I leave, just that organizational change. And then I think at that point, the city's really set.
Thank you.
It's not that he doesn't have any needs in the budget, though.
Or that he's leaving.
Yeah. Or
No, there's needs in the budget, not
There'll be
engineering,
plenty to talk about in the budget process.
specific engineering, no. Yeah, I think we're good.
Other questions for Mr. Dorsey or about this matter? Okay, you'll be voting on the adoption of an ordinance authorizing a civil engineer, one position. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hear none? Congratulations, Mr. Dorsey. Thank you for coming, Deb. All right, we're on to item C, adoption of a resolution accepting the 2017-2018 Sedgwick Road and Bethel Road Conceptual Corridor Study Draft Plans. Mr. Bond.
On June 27th, 2017, the city entered into a professional services agreement with SCJ Alliance Consulting Services to prepare a draft conceptual study for the Sedgwick Road and Bethel Road corridor. In August 2018, SCJ provided the draft plan to the city, and on September 25th, 2018, the City Council held a public hearing on the draft plan. After considering public comments, the council requested that the city attorney prepare a resolution accepting the draft plan as the final work product pursuant to the 2017 agreement. Staff recommends that council vote to adopt a resolution accepting the draft conceptual plan for Sedgwick and Bethel Road corridors as the final work product of the SCJ Alliance Consulting Services contract pursuant to that 2017 professional services agreement.
Councilmember Lucarelli.
I move to adopt a resolution accepting the draft conceptual study plan for the Sedgwick Road and Bethel Road corridor as the final work product of SCJ Alliance Consulting Services pursuant to the 2017 professional services agreement.
Second.
Second by Councilmember Diener. Any questions for Mr. Bond? Mr. Diener?
So what differences, if any, are there in this from the public hearing draft?
Essentially, the two big ones, we had some comments from WashDOT that were incorporated, and then we had comments from Kitsap Transit that were incorporated concerning looking at the bus stop design as part of final design rather than identifying a specific solution in this document. I don't think there were other significant changes other than those two.
What was WASDOT?
Go ahead.
What was DOT's?
DOT, in the comment matrix that we provided at the last
Oh,
meeting.
it did, it had.
They had a number of comments, and some of them were about how they were displaying different information. It really wasn't significant changes in the overall form of what we've come up with.
Thank you, I'm remembering that now.
Yes, Mr. Chang, actually.
I was just wondering if you could give a high level of what some of the next steps would be. For example, I was reading this on the boat this morning, and I was getting worried about the phasing strategy. Now, I know we're not there because we don't have the money, but I just wanted to confirm that we will have time to refine the phasing strategy. For example, stage 1, I saw starts with 2 roundabouts where there are none at Salmonberry and Blueberry. And I remember thinking, I'm not sure that's, I just hope we have time to revisit that and talk about the phasing and the scoping of that.
Sure. So the phasing, from a constructability standpoint, there aren't a lot of alternatives to this. The only alternative is to consolidate multiple phases into one earlier phase. So if you wanted to do phases 1 and 2 or 1, 2, and 3 at the same time, you could, but there are reasons that Salmonberry is the intersection that is failing most immediately and needs to be addressed first. And in order to build a median in any portion of Bethel, you need to have bookend roundabouts where you can make the U-turn going in either direction because you're losing the left turn lane or the ability to make a left turn. So you have to build 2 roundabouts at a time, and that's the most manageable of the projects, and it's the most urgent of the projects. In terms of overall next steps, from a policy standpoint, we'll be looking at adopting this as a part of the comprehensive plan next year as part of the comp plan amendments. We will also be looking at working these numbers into our traffic impact fee study because these are more updated compared to our previous numbers. And so that impact fee study is budgeted for next year. We, at the retreat, did talk about doing a 60% design for the entire corridor, but I believe that Tremont is sort of cutting into our ability to do that in the next biennial cycle. And so, just thinking about the Tremont project and that federal clock that was ticking on us, we really don't want to take any federal grant money to design this, because that's going to put us on a, on a ticking clock. So I think realistically, we're looking at design in 2021, 2022, and designing all of phase one, or maybe phase 1 and 2, in-house before we actually go seek any grant money, because we don't want to get a grant until we're ready to build something. And Mark, you can add to that if.
I would also just comment, Councilman Chang, that when we do that, that section is the first phase, and I would assume your concern is the fact that that's a well-traveled road, and what's going to happen to that traffic. So I think prior to starting that construction, we're going to have to do some improvements on Ramsey, are we not? Because we're going to have to be able to move the traffic.
Correct. With the phase 1, we had them add Ramsey to that because you're going to need to set up a detour, and that road is like 18 feet of pavement right now, so it wouldn't be set up to handle that volume. But I think the other thing to remember is that once Tremont comes online, I would anticipate traffic to be actually flowing away from the Salmonberry intersection and either towards Sedgwick or towards Tremont, as the east-west volumes sort of equalize between those two corridors. So hopefully the volume that's traveling Bethel right now, trying to avoid the Tremont project, isn't going to be quite as heavy in another year.
Councilmember Diener.
Nick, on page 110, are shown or listed a number of appendices, which I don't think we have. I do remember seeing some of these, but not all of these, and I was just wondering if you could walk us through that.
So those were provided when we distributed the draft plan. The appendices haven't changed, except that the word draft has been replaced by final. We just wanted to save paper on the paper copies, but those are just being carried forward and converted to final documents.
Okay.
I think at least one of those is a full, just like the Tremont plan on the wall, there's a full plot plan showing
Yeah.
the corridor. There's also the right-of-way acquisition plan that identifies the anticipated right-of-way needs. That was actually adopted. We had them do that work pretty early in this process so that we could get it into the comprehensive plan and make sure that development is consistent with those acquisition plans. And I can't think of the other two off the top of my head without turning to that page. Yeah, the cost estimates haven't changed. The stormwater drainage memo and the sensitivity analysis haven't changed. And items A and B haven't changed either.
Okay. So we have those in earlier documents.
Correct.
Okay.
Councilmember Clausen.
Yeah, Nick, I think I know the answer, but if you could confirm, how will this impact or help us when we talk with DOT about improvements along the 160 corridor?
So, once this is adopted into our comprehensive plan, we have adopted a plan, a preferred alternative, and so we're going to count on DOT and the city to move forward with this being the adopted plan for the corridor, and they will help us as access permits come in from the state highway. But I think the plan is more helpful in the sense that we can talk to our elected officials, we can talk to grant agencies and actually use this as a marketing material to say, look, we've done the study, we've done the analysis, we're ready to move forward with this, project. And we took this approach at my last employer when we were applying for money through PSRC, and basically we did the study, and then we used the study and we got grant after grant to implement what was in that document, because it follows, it's almost written in a way that is tailored to those grant applications.
Well, that was my impression, that this is basically taking the first step for the state. And even though we did it on a state highway, it's still in our city, and this will help us when we talk with our legislators about.
The one thing that the mayor and I have discussed and we're looking into, and is, our impact fee ordinance allows for an interlocal agreement between jurisdictions, and so we've talked about the possibility of the county and the city entering into an agreement where we would help collect some of the money to pay for this, but the county would adopt the same fee that the city does for a specific geographic area. And so maybe from just north of Salmonberry to, what's the Beelmeyer, somewhere down south, all the way out to the ferry terminal, is creating kind of a sub-area for a state highway-specific impact fee that we could make sure that everybody who's developing in the area is contributing to funding that project, and that might be a way to move this thing along. But we've just discussed the idea. I think we can explore it further if the council is interested.
Gives Brianna a tool also, as she's down in Olympia for us.
Well, it's a little bit different than what's happened up in the north end on 305. We got the funding for 305 before we knew what we were going to do on 305, which was a little backwards, but the community came together and identified where those expenditures should go, and has helped DOT to move forward, and this is kind of the first step towards something similar to that, so.
Speaking of, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, I like your idea. I think we should have a corridor, what do they call them, a corridor group, and it may just be the county and transit and Kitsap, and Port Orchard, to come together to plan what's going to happen out there. Because all of the growth in the county is going to travel our section of the road.
And at the KRCC board meetings, I noticed when I attended the last meeting, every meeting there's a report about different state highway projects, and they say, here's the report on the 303 project, and SR 160 isn't one of the things that seems to be on the radar, and so I think we need to elevate its presence in discussions just to kind of plant the seed for future funding requests.
And I think this is exactly what's going to do that. This is the first step towards bringing it to the table and having something to talk about.
And this may not be the appropriate time, but we have also, the city has been approached about such a coalition to move forward with the Highway 16, Highway 3 study. And that would involve Bremerton and the port and the county and the military and the city, yeah.
Lots of needs.
Yeah, lots of needs.
That's right. Further discussion of this item? Okay, if not, you'll be voting on the adoption of a resolution accepting the Sedgwick and Bethel Roads Conceptual Corridors Draft Study Plan. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, the motion carries. We are on to the approval of the September 25th council meeting minutes. Is there a motion to approve?
Mr. Mayor, I make a motion to approve the minutes of September. Sorry? I can't make a motion even if I wasn't there.
I know,
We're
Mr.
absent.
Were you absent also?
Yeah.
Okay. I knew John was gone. I hadn't gotten that far.
Both.
I would be glad to make a motion to approve the minutes as presented.
Second.
Tough to be the motion maker when you're going to abstain. A motion and a
Right.
second?
If this is correct.
That's correct.
Second. When Councilmember Lucarelli seconded. So, any additions or subtraction to those minutes? Or questions about them? Okay.
Are they correct?
I think they are.
They look good.
I was looking at the wrong one.
All in favor of approval, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? And I believe I have 2 abstentions.
Extension, yes.
Okay. We are to item E, discussion of the Lodging Tax Advisory Committee's recommendation for 2019 funding allocation. Ms. Reinerson.
Advisory Committee heard presentations from applicants who are requesting funds for 2019 from the hotel motel tax. On October 4th, 2018, the committee met to discuss the applications and to provide the council with a recommendation of the allocation of funds. Staff is looking for direction from the council as to if they want to bring this item forward at the next council meeting for adoption, or to bring this item to the next work study session for further discussion. So for the record, the committee discussed and recommended for the City Foot Ferry Services, $6,500. The Fathoms of Fun Events and Marketing, $28,000. Kitsap Mustang Club, $2,500. POBSA for marketing and events, $20,000. Port Orchard Bay Street Association Events Tourism Marketing, $10,000. Port Orchard Chamber of Commerce for their tourism marketing visitor center and Seagull Calling Festival, $28,530. The Saints Car Club, $2,400. Sydney Museum and Arts Association for marketing, $5,070. And Visit Kitsap for $22,000 for the amount of $125,000.
So this was discussed yesterday at Economic Development. So the biennial budget is programming $100,000 each year. We do have 91,000, I believe is the number, in our reserves. 95. We did confirm today, Noah and I did, that it is right on about 100,000 is what we're getting. So you could approve at the next meeting this level of funding. I guess the concern would be that we're setting the bar and the expectations from the nonprofits that there's 125,000 available, and that's not sustainable because we're not getting that much in revenue. We would need to, next year's process would need to review what we truly got in collections and to reevaluate whether or not only 75, which would be what's appropriated in the budget, because 125 of the 200 would be appropriated or spent in the first year of the biennium. And if revenue comes in higher, then additional funds could be allocated to that. So Councilmember Lucarelli?
I do have some concerns. I do think that budgeting for $125,000 is too much. And when I looked at some of the increase in sums in here, I was pretty surprised by the amount of increase, including there's a whole new ask with the Port Orchard Chamber asking for $30,000 when heretofore they have not asked for anything, or we have not granted, I'm not sure which. So that's a huge expenditure of $28,500. I do recall a discussion too in the past that with POBSA marketing, part of the increase that we gave them back in the day had to do with the consolidation of efforts in marketing. So now I'm starting to see a separation again, and that's a lot of funds there. POBSA with the $20,000 ask, and then when you combine it with the chamber ask, you've got almost $50,000. Beck, you have something?
Yeah, I can address that particular piece of your questions.
Okay.
And it may help some of the other council members looking at this. There was a time, and I'm sorry, I'm not good with dates, but I was doing the marketing for the Port Orchard Bay Street Association. And I felt, as did other people, that we could get, should we say, more bang for our bucks if we did collective marketing. And so we established a group called Explore Port Orchard, and that consisted of the Chamber, of POBSA, the Port was part of it. Fathom, yes, Fathoms came to the table, but they did not participate and continued to do their own marketing. So when you look at this sheet, you will notice directly the Port Orchard Chamber this year asked for $30,000. They were allowed 28. They were awarded 28. And then you can see there were 3 items below that they were. That's taking the place of. Instead of having 3 separate asks this year, they have 1 ask. And so anyway, that's where that is. The Explore Port Orchard did not work as efficiently or as effectively as the group had hoped, so it pretty much has gone away. And I believe the Chamber and POPSA will still do some collective marketing, but they're asking for their own dollars.
And really, I don't believe it's the council's role to get into the nuts and bolts of the individual allocations. It's whether you accept the recommendation or you're going, plan to, and we would, if you accept it, we'll bring it back in 2 weeks for the adoption. If you reject it this evening and want the committee to reconsider their work with maybe some sort of a global recommendation, that could be an additional alternative. Councilmember Chang?
The packet mentioned that we would be getting minutes prior to our council meeting for lodging tax. Are those available?
I'm still working on them.
Okay, okay.
I apologize, just haven't had the time to draft up the minutes. The audio is on the council page. I'd be happy to distribute those afterwards and make sure you have them prior to the adoption if you choose to move it to the next business item or the next business meeting.
I guess the question that I'm wondering if that would help with is what was the justification for the amount that they are recommending? It seems that the recommendation is higher than now I'm getting a little fuzzy here, the projected amount versus the reserves. I mean, ignoring the reserves for a moment, the committee's traditionally been very within a certain bounds, so it seemed that and I just wonder, which is fine, I just wonder what was their justification for the 125 as opposed to 100? Were there specific items that really appealed to them, or? Yeah, that's what
Jay,
puzzled me. Maybe, Jay, you can answer.
Councilmember Rosa Pepe, I don't know if you, since you were the chair of the committee,
I'll
if you
jump
want
in.
to speak to it, or I'd be happy to. I just don't, wanted to give you an opportunity to weigh
No, I've
in
been
before I
waiting,
do.
just listening.
Okay.
In answer to the question, and, we had this discussion partly yesterday, was the fact that it was felt that the reserves had been growing and not utilized. And that in these, the asks that were made by the various, and they were, a lot of them were roll-ups, if you looked, as Councilmember Ashby pointed out, that they're all good, and it was a question that the committee wanted to come back and ask for the reserves, part of the reserves that were there. They are realizing that this is not a continual 125. They wanted to just basically lower the reserves. Councilmember Ashby has pointed out that you don't have the money to begin with coming in, so that may not be a prudent thing to do. And at this point in time, I mean, based on what I'm hearing from the council and from the economic development yesterday, it'd be prudent to refer it back to committee for another go at the $100,000 level. There are some challenges, not from the point of making a decision, but it was some interesting discussion revolving around the bang for the buck on advertising and getting the information out about Kitsap and who was best putting our best face forward, so to speak, on the city. Is that about capturing it right?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Clausen?
Yeah, I think, and I appreciate what you're saying, and I have a bit of a concern over tapping into the reserves, but on the other hand, if we're anticipating the annual revenue to be 100,000 and we have reserves of 90,000, it seems like it's just a bit much in the reserves. So my question would be more to Noah on what would be the appropriate level of reserves that we should hold in that regard. I mean, is it, if it's for cash flow purposes, that because the revenue comes in over the year and these events, and some of them want the money right at the time of their event, it might be for cash flow, but if it's simply to cover that anticipated downturn that we might experience after we've made the commitment to these folks, I don't know. I don't know what the
I think
appropriate
it's a bit
level
of,
is, and
a bit of
I
both.
see
But a little.
Councilmember Ashby is
Well, I just,
wanting to.
what I said yesterday, and you directed it to Noah, but what the practice has been is we will collect LTAC dollars all of 2018. And whatever the balance is in the account at the end of 2018 is what we allocate for 2019, so that we're not, so I think the problem is the word reserve. I don't think those are reserves. Those are the monies that we have collected, and then we will just disperse, we will deploy them next year.
Well, I
So
know in the
there's-
past that we've deliberately held back on not allocating all of what we anticipated receiving so that we would have, call it what you will, some monies left over. And I don't think that's a bad thing. I just think that we need to have some thought as to what's the appropriate level. Again, having $90,000 in a reserve for what is anticipated to be an annual income of $100,000 seems like a bit much, but I don't know, so
But I commented on yesterday, or asked, was if they wanted to spend $125,000, and again, I don't have a problem with it, but they were under the impression that there was $100,000 in an account that was not being used at all. And that's, in my mind, not the case. I liken it to my real estate taxes on my house. I put a certain amount of money in savings every month, and come next April, I can write a check, and I start the process over again. And that's what we have done with LTAC. When the money comes in at the end of the year, this is what we have to deploy the next year. So the fact that it is building up, you know, do you want to spend that early is kind of the question. So there
So
was.
what you're suggesting is what we're giving out in 19 is what we collected in 18?
That is correct. And
But
it's,
I guess I missed that in.
and
we-
it's
really, that came about, it isn't a hard, fast rule, but when we went through the economic downturn, we got, I mean, we all remember, when those of us that were on the council, we had to ratchet everybody back because we
that.
didn't have enough to honor the allocations that we'd made. And so that's where this, you know, we've gone to where we're not, you know, holding some back so that we have a reserve, or, and it's cash flow also.
That's what I
It's really
remember.
both. It's cash
I
flow
remember it was
and
just that
reserve.
because we're making a commitment on something we hadn't received yet, that we were a little reluctant to allocate all of what was anticipated until we get it in hand. So the excess was kept in the checkbook, call it what you will, and it sounds like, to me, that all those little extras have now added up to being $90,000. So I don't think it's a bad thing to have that reserve in. I guess my question, once again, is what is the appropriate level? And I know I'm catching you cold on it.
No, I appreciate.
Let's
I
let Noah
appreciate-
speak to that.
Appreciate the conversation, because I think you guys are all saying the same thing, just a little bit differently. We're all looking at cash flow timing, when expenses are actually going to hit that fund, and we won't have revenue there available. So 90,000 might be there today, and then might be 50,000 tomorrow. But we're going to anticipate some revenue to come in. So there is a cash flow component, as John has pointed out, and as Beck has talked about, that if no revenue comes in, you've made these obligations, you spend that down to zero, you're done. So I think you guys are saying the same thing, and I want to support what you guys are saying. I think the real question is, what kind of policy do you want to have governing this reserve balance?
Yes.
A part of it should be cash flow concerns, and a part of it might be longer-term thinking about other opportunities in the future during harder times. Now, certainly they can go forward with this proposal and spend into that 100,000, spend down to 75. And I think what we've been talking about is you really want to be cautious about sending out a message that that's a sustainable funding level, because we can demonstrate that it's not. We will spend that down to zero very quickly, and we might hit some cash flow concerns in our second year. So I think it goes back to your question is, what is the policy that we would like to see come forward from the LTAC committee of how to use these funds? Piece of it's got to be cash flow, and then part of it's got to be something else as well.
Councilmember Lucarelli?
I'm also wondering how much money, it's a reimbursement policy that a reimbursement situation here. How much money is out there, or asks are out there potentially for yet this year that hasn't
It's
been
accounted
reimbursed?
for in these balances.
Okay, it's accounted for?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, we have 93, and we're moving forward. You guys haven't seen the budget yet, but the biennial budget has 100,000 in each year, and that's where this number is coming from.
But I mean, but the 91 that we're talking about, that's a reserve, how much of that is rather obligated?
None.
None?
None.
Okay, that's what I need.
And we're projecting $100,000 in revenue to be received in 2019. It's just the cash flow, the timing and the cash flow.
That's my point, is that we have 90,000 today, uncommitted.
Correct.
Whereas we're being asked to allocate 125, we're anticipating, excuse me, an additional 100 next year. So in essence, if we approve this, we're gonna spend 100 that we anticipate, plus the extra 25 out of the 90, which
Correct.
is reserve.
And so then we would just ask that the budget process, what we're proposing in the budget, will only have 200,000. So
Agreed.
that only 75 will be available unless the council takes action, because we see more revenue than that. Or you're comfortable with those reserves being down at 65.
Right, but if we hold the expenditures in 20 to 75, and the revenue continues to come in at 100,
We come in at
we
90.
will replace this 25
Yes.
in that reserve number.
Yes.
So it gets back to what is the appropriate dollar amount for that reserve, whether it's appropriate, the need is for cash flow, or whether it's just anticipating if we do have a bad year, we've already made an obligation to these people once we approve this. And if we don't receive the 100 or 125, we either tell them, don't spend it, or we gotta make it up.
Yeah, or we're gonna eat the reserves,
Or
which is.
that's what I mean by making it up.
Yeah, and which all could be fine. What we're setting up is a scenario where this time next year, we're gonna we're not doing a budget, but we'll be doing
Yeah,
a
no,
budget
I
amendment,
understand.
and we will be visiting this again, which is fine.
That's
It's
the
perfectly
biennial
fine.
thing, but
Yes,
So I
Councilmember
don't-
Rosa Pepe.
I don't know if I can make a motion on this, but I would move that we return this to committee for further.
I'm not necessarily hearing that they're not
Well,
supportive, but,
Yeah, but he's making the motion.
okay, you go ahead.
that we return to committee to come back at the with recommendations to $100,000 level.
I second that.
Okay, we got a motion, a second, to,
The other comment that I want to make, that I made yesterday, is we have not had additional hotel rooms or beds in Port Orchard for some time. And if you look at the sheet that we were given, you will see that this is a very consistent amount of money. So we're kind of at this plateau. So there's an expectation, I mean, in my mind, $100,000 is just about what LTAC generates every year. So if we want to keep the funding stable for our nonprofits, that would be good. Otherwise, we're going to expect a 25% increase in LTAC. And I don't know if that's reasonable.
not knowing what the average occupancy is, I agree with you. I think we should keep it at the 100,000, but I would also suggest that during this next year, if Noah has some spare time, to give it some thought, to come back with a policy on what would be the appropriate minimum amount we should keep in that. So we're not just arbitrarily picking a number and saying, no, you can't have it because.
Councilmember Rosa Pepe.
Thank you. Also, you know, I agree with you, John, that, you know, whether it's even that you keep last year's number as the reserve number or the spending number going into next year, I think that's a prudent thing to do and give us a little bit more, a better avenue on the committee to make this decision. And so,
Well, and it'd help us, I mean,
yeah,
it doesn't do any good to have the money sitting in the bank, but I also want to make sure we have
I
enough
agree. Yeah.
for whatever the purpose is, so that's all I'm thinking.
Says Councilmember Chang?
I have a question, and maybe Jay, you can answer. Did the committee wonder how this money could be spent? Were they afraid that the reserves would be spent on something other than what they were looking at?
No, it was actually a looking at the reserves over time, the fact that they had grown, And would this be a good time to look at it, at spending some of it down, and what would be the appropriate amount? The realization was not that 125 would always be there. I mean, you know, on that side, it's just what the appropriate amount would be to lower them. If it's the council's desire to maintain, like I said, you know, like 1 year in reserves for downturn, I think that, you know, that's reasonable, but that gives us additional guidance, and that's what I'm hearing tonight.
Councilmember Lucarelli?
Just one more thing is, in the past, we've talked about cities actually making use of the LTAC funds. We haven't really made use of that, but we may want to consider that in the future as we're growing our city with the various parks and sort of whatever is applicable. We may, as a city, be able to make use of some of those funds and apply for them ourselves. I'm just saying, we haven't been doing that, but it might be very appropriate for us as we build up a little bit to make use of some of those funds that way, whatever is allowed.
Okay. Any more discussion? Okay. Councilmember
I
Chang?
guess the thing that I'm missing, and I'm sort of, I don't know exactly how you're thinking back, but I'm not opposed to the expenditure of 125 if I knew what that additional amount was focusing on. And you don't have to answer, but I think if with maybe the minutes, like if there's a special project or something that justified the additional expense, I could see supporting that.
The only thing that was, I won't say out of whack, because everybody consolidated their ask, so we didn't have like 20 asks. We only had, I think it was 8 that we had. The only unusual expense that stood out was a used vehicle for Fathoms, because their towing vehicle is evidently has seen better days. But that, even that wasn't that out of line when you look at previous ask and percentages. It was actually looking at using some of the reserves to fund at a higher level, because feeling that even though we're looking at plateauing, you know, in the economy, that things are still stable, and quite frankly, that Port Orchard is starting to make inroads. What was it? Kitsap, the magazine yesterday.
Oh, yeah, the Puget Sound Business
This journal
Yeah.
had a very nice piece on Kitsap and Port Orchard, and that those things are coming to fruition. That even though we don't have a lot of hotel beds, which we all agree with, we do have a very vibrant night scene, and it's picking up steam. I hope that helps.
All right, so there's a motion and a second on, for remanding this back to the LTAC committee, and with the recommendation that they keep within the $100,000 appropriation. All in favor of that motion, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, motion carries. We are on to item F, which is a discussion item about the Destination Port Orchard video. So a few months back, John Powers came to our Economic Development Committee and made some recommendations about our website and some other, and a recommendation about the video that we did, 6 or 8 years ago. And he said it's a little dated. He said maybe it could be spruced up and condensed. It was his idea. I met with Hal, was it Calborn? Calborn. And a couple days ago, Hal and I reviewed the video. Hal did the original video, and he felt that the content in that existing video was dated and really wasn't worth trying to spruce up. And he said it would cost about $5,000, which we have in the budget, to try to do that exercise, but that wasn't his recommendation. So I asked him, he said, he recommended, we've got a lot of exciting things going on in Port Orchard, or on the cusp of having, and he felt that a video featuring McCormick Village Park, our waterfront, some of the businesses in our industrial park, would be more appropriate. We don't have, you know, he's asking for 2 phases to this. We'd have money for the first phase. There's money for, you know, we would have to appropriate the second phase in the budget process we're in right now. So I just wanted to check in with you and see how you guys thought about that, whether you felt it was worthwhile or not. I could go either direction on it.
Does he suggest the lifespan for this new video? How
I
old
think
was the old one you said?
I think it was 6 or 8 years ago we did the last one, and it is. It's
Okay.
just a little, the information gets old. So I don't think we're gonna get more than 5 or 6 years at the most. It would be, for it to be relevant.
So is he asking for $5,000 for each phase?
It's 5,000 and then 4,500. It's not, the total
So-
proposal is $9,500
For 4 minutes. For up to 4 minutes.
for up to 4 minutes.
Have we considered asking other people for ideas, or do we want to use him again? I mean, there's nothing wrong with what he did, but it just seems anti-competitive.
I sought no other proposals because he had done, I went into this believing we were going to update or modify what we had.
I see.
And he came to the meeting and said, I wouldn't do that. He goes, the content just isn't, it's dated. He goes, it's just not a good use of your dollars, was his opinion. And we could tell him, no, we're wrong. We want to do that, or we want to do nothing. I'm fine, I'm fine with it either way.
Well,
Councilmember Ashby, you're.
Well, I have some opinions on it, but what I would say, because I've done a lot of marketing, and 3.5 to 4 minutes is too long, and that's what Mr. Powers told us. And if I were going to do something that, in my opinion, your marketing needs to be targeted rather than a shotgun approach. You need to do target marketing. I would end up probably with 3 videos, and they may be together, each like 1.5 minutes for your 4.5 minutes. I would have one for people that wanted to come and live here, and I would focus on our schools, our police, our medical, all those things that new residents would look to. If you want to do a visit, and I would have one visitor play, and it would be on our recreational things and our nightlife and our marinas and that sort of stuff. And then I would have one on work or attracting the businesses. So I would have like 3 targeted ones, and maybe you push a button and you get into the middle of it. But I wouldn't do one 3.5 to 4 minute thing. Anyway, that's my opinion.
So I
but
heard recreation, economic development, and the third is
living here.
quality of life.
quality of life.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
And I wholeheartedly agree, because I think this is a very impressive proposal, but it doesn't identify the audience.
Yeah.
And you're thinking like, who?
It's good feedback.
Who is it for?
I like that direction. I really do. When I look at this, my first reaction was prosperity. I didn't care for that. I didn't care for people, place, prosperity. I'm just saying, when I looked at this, that's not, Port Orchard is a small town. We're growing, but prosperity is not what we're selling here, what I think of. Not that we're not prospering, not that we're not growing,
That's not.
but I wouldn't make that one of the keywords.
That grabbed me as well.
Okay.
So Mr. Clausen?
Well, I was just going to comment on Beck's comments, and I totally agree.
I like that.
You need to figure out who your audience is, and
Okay.
what this video, similarly to what we have now, it's only being distributed basically on Kita's website
And our webpage, that's
and
correct.
our webpage, but most of it is Kita. Now, the folks that are going to go to the Kita website are more looking for business places and that sort of thing, but I really like your concept of having the 3 different, because then it's more appropriate, not only on the Kita, but it would also work well on our website of here's Port Orchard, and it's more than just a nice office building.
So what I'm hearing is you'd like us to seek some other proposals, or possibly, so we can do some Brandy and I can do some outreach there. And in those proposals, we're looking for potentially 3 videos of approximately a minute and a half apiece. Is that what we're looking for? And each one featuring recreation or recreational opportunities, economic development, and then quality of life. Is that what I'm,
Well, the recreation side, if I
that sounds like
add
quality
into
and life.
it, was more of, you know, again, the audiences, and the audience that Beck mentioned is people that visit. For folks that are just coming to visit, what are they gonna be interested in? And,
Yeah, and it's something that would attract your boaters.
yeah,
Visitors, okay.
it's more than just recreating, it's,
I think you could probably fold some of our recreational opportunities into the living component of the.
yeah, I would
Right,
think
they would
something like the
overlap.
parks
Yeah.
and that sort of thing.
So
would work
something
both.
targeting to visitors is what I'm hearing. So something targeted to visitors.
Tourism.
Tourism visitors, yes. And then, and it's an economic development, economic opportunities. I think the opportunity zones and.
For businesses.
Yeah.
What's our current 3 items on our current video? Isn't it?
Live, work, and play.
Live, work, and play. That about sums up the 3 right there to a certain degree.
Yeah,
Right.
exactly.
They just have different labels.
Yeah.
It's just
Yeah,
a,
you
know,
just need
keep
the
it short.
audience
Yeah.
focus those 3 elements.
Those are very simple and succinct.
Yeah, but we need change, right?
Yep.
Just saying.
Okay. I'll do some more homework and I'll be back. All right, thanks for the direction. All right, we are done with our business items. We are to council committee reports. And the finance committee meets next week. I don't believe you've met since our last meeting. We have a meeting next Tuesday, I think at 4 o'clock is when you guys start. If I remember correctly.
16.
4 o'clock at 16th,
Yep.
yes. Economic Development Tourism met yesterday.
Yeah, and you guys, we talked about LTAC. No.
Thank you for your report.
We also talked, we had Chris Piercy from the county again, giving us an update on the plastic bags. And I believe the committee will be prepared to discuss it much as we're doing this evening at the end of this second meeting in December. That's what our intent is. I think there's time for us to do it rather than waiting to the January work study. We also talked about the summer foot ferry, the service that we provide during the summer. And ridership was down, but we have kind of a hard time comparing it to last year or the year before because we've altered the schedule. And this last year, we only did Sundays from 10 to 6, plus some holidays. So we're not sure. We didn't spend any more money than we had allocated, so that was the good news. We will be, Brandy will be putting a meeting together with our Foot Ferry partners to do a review this fall and and decide whether we're going to go forward again next year. And hopefully we can make all that work. And then Mr. Bond gave us a presentation from a workshop he had been to on the cash flow of urbanism. And it was pretty enlightening, and it's basically about, Nick, do you want to speak just a little bit to it, or should I fumble through it?
Sure. So I don't know how many of you have had a chance to look at it, but it's essentially encouraging cities to take a look at the efficiency of land use on a property tax revenue per acre basis, rather than simply looking at what are your biggest contributors to the property tax base, or even who are your biggest contributors to the sales tax base. It's how much are you yielding per acre. And what we are realizing is that surface parking lots are taxed as raw land, and so when you have a 26-acre retail type site, the per acre contribution is a lot less than it would appear to be if you just look at the gross number received by the city. And so when you compare, a 2-story building downtown, or if you look at a live-work unit in Paulsbo, or a 4-story building in Bremerton, you realize that our revenue per acre is like 15% of what it could be with a different type of building on that site within the city. So it's something that I think Noah and I really need to talk about as we develop land use plans to really think about what types of land uses are we allowing and what is the revenue picture going to be for the city as a result of allowing that type of use, and how do we encourage more very valuable type projects to come into the city to make the revenue base more sustainable.
And that was our meeting.
All right. The Utility Committee.
Yes, we are going to be meeting on the 15th at 9:30 here at City Hall.
And Sewer Advisory, looks like it's tomorrow night.
It's tomorrow night here at City Hall, 6:30.
Okay. Land use, have you met?
Yeah, we met on September 24th. We had a couple items we talked about. One was a presentation by the Washington State University Master Gardeners Extension. They would like to partner with the city for a demonstration garden. Think of pea patches. They have some specific needs for those projects, including a fair amount of parking. I think they said they've had as many as 30 people there at once. So parking needs, obviously water, signage, picnic tables, they said would be ideal, as well as shelters. Right now, nothing jumps out to meet their needs out of the gate, but we're going to stay in touch with each other and see if something can be developed as parks are developed or considered. And then the other thing we talked about were revisions to chapters 20.22 and 20.96, which is what we had talked about tonight.
Okay. Thank you for your
Oh,
report.
and I don't think we've identified our next meeting date
Haven't.
yet.
And Mr. Kachardi's not here this evening, so that's not going to help your
Yeah.
man. And lodging tax, you have a meeting coming up.
We have an upcoming meeting, TBD, and I'll get together with Randy later.
Okay.
But I would like to say thank you to the council for the discussion. I think it was very helpful, so thank you.
Chimes and lights?
We have a meeting next Monday at 3:30, and I will say that we are moving forward with our brochure, and it will go to press this week.
What percentage of our spots have we sold for the tree decoration contest?
No, I don't have the latest update on that. I think we're at around 20.
Okay.
And I don't know how many have paid. That's my problem, is I don't know how many have actually paid. Janine and I will be talking about that soon. Yeah, I've been focusing more on the brochure because of the deadline. It isn't bad. It isn't bad. We are needing more sponsors on the south side of the street. The north side is doing very well.
And outside agencies, do you have anything back?
No, just a reminder that the KRCC's legislative reception is November 29th. It's a Thursday. And as a member of the PSRC Transportation Policy Board, I've been invited to a bus tour on I-5. Yeah, which should,
Just a park and?
well,
Sounds
yeah, no,
delightful.
we're gonna go up and look at all of the issues with I-5
I think they
within.
call that Greyhound.
So anyway, that sounds interesting to me.
So, and I don't have any agency reports or anything to report on other than tomorrow, I'll be up in Seattle all day for a ferry summit. Other communities want to capture what Kitsap County has done with high-speed ferries, whether it be Tacoma or Everett or Olympia. And long-term, if that's going to happen, we need to figure out where all those boats would dock in Seattle, because everybody wants to go to Seattle. So I'll be there tomorrow.
Just wanted to say that the AWC meeting was very helpful. I really appreciate the effort that took, because it was great for bringing the communities together.
Yes, that was on my mayor's report.
Oh,
so
I'm sorry.
That's just fine. We're to the mayor's report, and that was my first thing, was thank you for those that attended the AWC regional meeting. I thought it went very well. Light turnout, but it was the same night as Harrison's 100th anniversary. John had a transit community
Public
forum,
meeting,
and there were a number of things going on that night, but
Great.
one of the things that came from that is one of the mayors, I want to say it's Port Angeles, has reached out to me and wants to do a quarterly, maybe every 6 months, mayor's forum, where everybody from She wants, I suggested Paulsbo. She thought Swim was much more centrally located.
No,
Was that Sissy?
Yeah,
There's, and I don't know whether you would have access to it, but I also represent Port Orchard on the Peninsula Regional Transportation Policy Board. And we meet frequently at the Jamestown Sklallam Tribe. Their tribal headquarters right there at the head of Squim Bay, and it's a wonderful facility.
okay.
So I think that's probably what Sissy was thinking about.
That's what she's thinking? Okay.
Chimicums.
So, yeah, maybe Chimicum Cafe, I don't know. So, Brandy and I have a request. Kira Greer, who is a local Girl Scout, is wanting to do a project arranging a youth council that would meet regularly with the council. And I think I'm gonna, if somebody staff really can't put staff resources to this, but if somebody wanted to create a committee, I'd gladly hand this off to you, and she could do her project, and if no one has any interest, then I can report that too. But initially, she wanted to probably have a seat at the council dais, and we told her that probably wasn't an option. But so this is what she's come back as her proposal, is to have some sort of a youth council. I know that I'm involved with Rotary. They have RILA, with this a youth leadership organization through the high school. So there are other avenues, than this for young folks to get involved in leadership opportunities. So stew on that, and if you have a desire to meet with a young lady, I'll gladly pass this on to you. The bag survey, Beck talked about that. We closed that out. 190 individuals in our community, businesses, or you lived here in Port Orchard, took the survey. 111, or 58%, said that they support the idea. I have a request from Fire District 7. As many of you know, we entered into an agreement for their fire inspection services with them a few years back. There's a provision in that agreement for them to request a COLA increase. They are requesting 3% for this current year and 3.3 for 2019, starting in 2019. So I just wanted to report that to you. The alternative would be really that we would fund our own employee at some point, but it's $50,000 is what we're paying. So we're paying about half of a little less than half of their employees' cost. So their costs are going up, and they're asking us to share in that. So.
What's the percentage? 3 and
3 for this year, which we're not actually going to, retroactively to June is when they're asking for it, I believe, in the memo. And 3.3 for next year is what they would appreciate. So it doesn't seem out of line. Let's see, I'm working on my committee appointments for the end of the year, and I'm struggling with Maureen Wheeler, represented the city on the county's grant recommendation for the services for the CBGD money at the county. And so if you know of anybody that would be interested in sitting on that committee, it isn't a huge time commitment. It's the county grant process for that the city has a representative at the table. So I'm at a little bit.
What does that stand for?
Community Block Development Grant.
Thank you.
Oh, okay.
Community Block Development Grants, I think is the acronym. And so it's the county's pool of dollars that come in, I think, from the filing fees. And they have a grant committee. There's one for capital projects, which Chris Stansberry's been serving on that for a number of years. And this particular committee, which is the service organizations providing services, nonprofits.
They're housed at Norm Dix.
Okay.
So I'd appreciate a recommendation of someone if you know someone interested. And I did have something for outside agencies. Here it is. It's in my mayor's report. So as you know, I'm the Small Cities representative for Puget Sound Regional Council's Growth Management Policy Board. And at our meeting last week, we talked about the 2050 visioning and the housing element, and there's a robust discussion about focusing on housing near transit centers. There were some folks in the room that really wanted some teeth in what PSRC proposes for those that don't meet their density goals, and which concerns me a little bit. I know I'm feel very strongly about local control and us making our own local decisions, what we feel is right for our community. I think I would be more supportive of incentives, for those that do meet their goals. But that's why it's important, I guess, that I attend the meetings, because those folks on the other side of the pond don't always think the way we do. So the next half of the meeting was really about the regional growth strategy, and there's it's the SEPA determination, isn't it, Nick? There's 4 alternatives that we're looking at. We're gonna eliminate at least one of them at our next meeting, and the first of the 4 alternative is staying the course and doing nothing different. The second alternative is called Forward from 2017, so it's stay the course, but we take the actuals from 2017 and then start over from that point. The third option is dispersed urban growth, and I kind of look at this as the peanut butter effect. You just kind of spread it out everywhere, and that really, for me, has, you end up with growth in rural areas, much more growth in rural areas than I think, not quite consistent with the Growth Management Act, in my opinion. And then the third alternative is transit-focused growth, and those that have high-capacity transit, whether it's ferries or light rail stations, that more of the growth is concentrated because communities have made significant investments in those high-capacity transit stations and ferry systems. So those are the 4 alternatives, and one of them's going to go away soon. So I'm just reporting on that. So did I capture that well?
Yeah, I was just going to say that third alternative that is the peanut butter approach, it's not that it's sending it to rural areas, it's sending it to the unincorporated, unaffiliated urban growth areas. So that's areas like in Kitsap County, like central Kitsap, it would be Kingston, it would be the Port Orchard UGA, it would also be the sort of suburbs of Tacoma and Everett in Pearson, Snohomish County. So it's really pushing the growth further out. And it's a huge number. I think the most growth under that alternative would go to those unincorporated, unaffiliated, or UGAs. Silverdale is a large city, so it would not be Silverdale. So I think there's a lot of concern about sending that much, even looking at an alternative that would send that much growth to the outlying areas.
County
Wasn't there a-
county commissioners seem supportive of that idea.
Wasn't there a
Is that being pushed by
technical-
Pierce County? Is that being pushed by Pierce County? Out of
I don't know
curiosity.
All of the counties are in favor of it.
Yeah.
I think the home builders organizations as well and realtors are pushing that because it's mostly single-family housing development.
I thought we got a technical memo from PSRC not too long ago that said that they wanted to focus growth from those unincorporated UGAs into cities. That was one of the
Yes,
pushes.
and that's
So-
that's the dilemma, is that there's written policy language that says that growth is preferred in cities,
Yeah.
yet they're considering looking at an alternative that would push growth away from cities. And so the question is this a realistic alternative, and why are we looking at something that has a very low likelihood of being adopted? So I think there's a lot of jurisdictions that don't want this considered at all, because ultimately you're going to select a preferred alternative that's probably a hybrid of a variety of them, and making a hybrid of this with anything else is still, a lot of people feel undesirable. So anyway, my recommendation would be to kick that one out first if you're going to kick any of them out. But I think the correct for the alternative 2 is the other one that's kind of on the chopping block. And really, this is a cost issue. It costs PSRC more money to develop an EIS that looks at 4 alternatives versus 3 or 2, and so they're trying to manage their resources.
I'm a little biased on the alternative, so
For the right reasons, I might add.
I have a vote that represents Bainbridge Island, Paulsbo, and Port Orchard. And to this point, the transit-oriented development or alternative is the one
it's favored.
is favored for the vote, the seat that I represent.
But will you have to vote on which one to eliminate?
Yes.
Yes, okay.
Yes. So, and I share Nick's concern, but I'm just one vote.
Yeah, right, no.
So with that, we're to our second citizen comment period. Is there anyone wishing to address the council this time? Oh, staff, why? God, Mark's been gone so long, I forgot about him, so. Mr. Dorsey?
So, couple quick updates. First, so utility committee, I think we're gonna have the Annapolis Crete presentation in November. I can't think of anything on that agenda that's gonna change, so I'm gonna propose that we postpone it to October, if that's all right. I don't see any value. So if that's okay with the committee? Ed? Okay, thank you.
So no 10:15.
Please make a note of that,
No
Brian.
10:15.
We're canceling the October utility committee. Another quick update. If you've not been to the McCormick Park lately, I wouldn't go right now. It's covered with Class B biosolids, so it's a bit sticky and smelly. The good news is both bridges are now set. The contractor is probably going to be out of there this month, with at least structures are being delivered this week.
We should be cutting a ribbon in November.
November, yeah.
It's not gonna, I'm going out there with Chris Henry on Monday. Hopefully the odor will be.
No.
Thanks. Mark.
It'll be a short visit.
I mean, it's just very earthy. I'm just saying,
Very earthy.
be careful. Take some boots in a plastic bag because that stuff's very sticky. But it's coming along really well. Tremont, an important update there is, we went through this whole cycle of like no backups, but right now we're doing that water line work right down the middle of Tremont from Pottery to Port Orchard Boulevard, so it's a bit problematic right now. The paving went smoothly. We're paved now all the way with the base paving from 16 up to the roundabout at Pottery, so that's all good. That right now we're doing that kind of in-road work again.
It actually hasn't been that bad. I've driven it the last couple days, and
Yeah.
I mean, there is a bit of.
Yeah,
flagging
it's like a
going on,
10-minute.
But it's not been horrible.
I went through it to look at McCormick Park, and I think I sat right there at Port Orchard Boulevard at the light for probably 10 minutes.
No,
And then by the time I
that was
went
an
through,
exception, because I sat there maybe through 2 cycles of the light, and that was about it.
yeah, I just noticed there's quite a backup coming up South Kitsap Boulevard the other direction. But all in all, things are moving really well. We'll be back on we're still kind of waiting for some poles to be moved down by the Marley apartment, but I think the contractor will be back out to finish the electrical for the lights this week. So, we're thinking we're going to be out of there at least ready to pave by the end of the month, and then we're going to be looking for weather. So and then Well 9's moving along really well. So project-wise, all the projects are moving along on schedule. What they ultimately cost, I don't know, but at least we're getting good products for they maybe come in a higher price, but it's not like we're gonna get a higher price crappy project. We're gonna have really nice things that we'll be proud of and it'll stand the test of time.
Noah? All things budget right now.
Yeah, I don't really have any updates tonight. We're going to be talking pretty much every meeting from here through December, so look forward to that.
Nick?
Nothing to report.
Sharon?
Nothing for me tonight, thank you.
Deb, what do you have? You've been doing orientation packets downstairs for all these new people we're
I
hiring.
know. Well, we mentioned that the civil engineer one person will be on board on the 28th. We have a public works worker coming in on the 22nd. And then we're doing oral boards right now for the police, court security, community services officer. And yesterday it was the deadline for the public works permit clerk. So we're going to be setting up interviews for that. And then hopefully we might be having police oral boards for a new officer, or hopefully on the 23rd of October, trying to get an officer and do some interviews with them. I think that's it right now. And I'm just juggling and doing orientation booklets and all kinds of good stuff, so.
Risk management training last week. And it was from a perspective of National Risk Pool Association agencies getting together and providing a conference and training. And that perspective is, how do the risk pool manage how much coverage that they provide their jurisdictions? And you look at it from a different angle, meaning they have, there's a handful of national risks that are up there right now. So for example, cybersecurity. So if you're breached or an organization is breached, how do you quantify that when you don't know what all of the risks are because they're not exposed yet? And it's pretty eye-opening when they talk about the cybersecurity that, everybody's information's already out there. It's just a matter of not when, or not if, it's a matter of when your information is going to be breached, and how do you protect that? How do you make sure your jurisdictions are covered in that, and at what excess of insurance for liability do you need to protect your members? So, and then they had a couple other topics about that we're pretty fortunate that we're not in those top ones, wrongful imprisonments, and that's their biggest claim. And they had somebody in wrongful detainment, so they had somebody come in and visit their son and put him in a holding cell until they can go and visit. Well, lo and behold, that her son was in a non-criminal section of the jail, and where they had put her was for the harder criminal. I don't know the terminology. To visit the harder criminals, and she was in there for 36 hours because they didn't have visiting for that day, and nobody knew she was in there. They forgot about it, and the only reason why they knew she was even in there is because she somehow managed to tamper with the fire alarm, and it set off, and they went in there and found her. And so for that particular case, they actually settled and was awarded $600,000 for that. And so the word is, if being detained wrongfully for 36 hours, what is the amount that we need to insure for people that are in wrongful imprisonment for 5, 10, 15 years? And so what they're having right now is a rash of cases that there's many people that have been wrongfully convicted and served time, and the era that they're looking at right now is from 1995. So these people have been, proven through DNA and all of that. So that's one area that is hitting nationally. The other one is fire department, where you have a firefighter that has been fighting and going into buildings and for many years, and now he's getting ready to retire and he's having health issues. And so they're looking at some sort of studies to determine, because he was going to, burning buildings, is that a cause? Is that L&I? Is that, who's covering those costs? And again, at what level do you insure when you don't know the unknown cost? So that's one, and then the other one is probably a more sensitive topic, but is sexual assault in the school districts. So they've seen a huge rise. I think it was one jurisdiction received like an 800% increase. Normally it's student to student, and so they've seen a high increase from student to teachers. And so again, how do you justify the dollar amount that you're going to have for your insurance to protect your pool? So it was very eye-opening from that perspective, and was glad to attend. So
Rather
thank you.
depressing topic, though. Yeah. Thank you for the report. So with that, now we'll go to citizen comments. All right. We are heading into an executive session pursuant to RCW 40.30.110 in regards to potential litigation. We should be about 15 minutes. So we will take no action afterwards. And thank you for coming this evening for the Boy Scouts. Appreciate it.